Once you have an idea about the macro and the micronutrients and about the plan in terms of looking at what food consists of, then the important part comes in, how am I going to plan my diet? And planning a healthy diet is not as difficult if we look at it basically. And I also want you to know that you do have access to getting some assistance with planning a diet through the navigators. And that's one of the options that I put in the behavior change folder. And I can help you with that too. Everything, no matter what you eat, food is energy. And it is there to fuel our body, to help us to move. And food does not have guilt. It does not have every recipe. It never has guilt as part of an ingredient. And so we are meant to enjoy our food, and it's okay to enjoy our food. And what we're looking for is a balance of enjoying our food and finding food that fulfills our social, our energy needs, our enjoyment, and also gives us some satisfaction. And each nutrient, macronutrient, has a caloric value. Carbohydrates and proteins both have approximately 4 calories per gram, and fats have approximately 9 calories per gram. And it actually takes energy to burn food, and when we exercise, we use primarily carbohydrates and fat if we depending on our exercise intensity. Now, the dietary guidelines get revamped every few years. And our registered dietitians and a number of nutritionists and professionals, physicians, get together and make recommendations, and they go through this long process to try to make it more user friendly every single time. And it has evolved, and to try to make it more accessible this last time, and now it's going to change again, it is to make everything count. Make your food count. Customize it, make it healthful in terms of eating nutrient dense foods. Be aware of your culture, your traditions, and to eat what you like, and to make sure that we are keeping in line of what our nutrient or our caloric values, our caloric needs are. And we also want to make sure that we are looking at the quality of our food and keeping a balance with our types of foods. So trying to limit the saturated fats, which can be linked with cardiovascular disease, and also to reduce our sodium because we tend to have a lot of that in our American diet, especially because we tend to eat a lot of convenience foods. Now, the dietary guidelines for us have been identified primarily in Figure 5.2. You can look at that a little bit more closely, but it identifies kind of like to build it what the components are, what to eat more of, and what to limit. So you can see have less alcohol, limit your sodium, have less saturated fat, and less salt. Now, the guidelines are going to be based upon your sex and your age, and also your energy level or your activity level. So if you are a person that is relatively sedentary and maybe you just do a little bit now and again, then you would be considered a light activity person. So you would use the sedentary equation. If you walk a mile and a half per day at a 15 to 20-minute pace per mile, then you'd be moderate. And if you exercise vigorously, then you would be active. So if you're in one of the activity classes, you exercise regularly at a higher intensity, then you would be somewhere between that moderate and active value. So there you could be somewhere in between there. So you have your female, male, your age, and then you could see that would be approximate caloric requirements that would be your recommendation. And again, if you'd like to have an assessment, just let me know and we can do that for you. Way that the system has made it easier is to visualize what your food should look like on your plate, generally speaking. And what the idea is to use a plate that is, so when you look at it, it should look pretty much quarters in terms of the macronutrients. And there is room for food that you would identify as kind of, um, you know, I would like to have a brownie. I would like to have a can of beer or a soda or whatever. And so they have a plate where it has fruits and vegetables would be half of what you eat at a meal. Grains would be a quarter of what you eat at that meal, and protein would be a quarter. But remember, as I mentioned to you, protein can be a little bit more depending on what your goal is, right? And we are looking also at varying the kind of protein that we're having. And I will tell you that dairy is on there. I'm not going to lie. There are some biases in this plate, but I am going to suggest to you that the fruits and vegetables as half of your food intake is very, very good. And with your grains, having whole grains, wonderful thing to do. Now, the American Heart Association has some guidelines, and they have identified fruits and vegetables as being really important, and the whole grains. And when you're choosing your proteins, having very low amount of red meat, and having very lean meat. That not only is good for your health, but it's also very good for the environment. There's something called the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and that is reducing sodium primarily, and that adds a different type of protein, and that adds nuts, seeds, and beans, and those are pinto beans, black beans, and having a different, emphasizing a different kind of protein in the diet. Now, there's also the Mediterranean diet. That's great. That has olive oil and a very, very heavy different kinds of vegetables, but it has a lot of olive oil in it. So, Mediterranean diet is actually been identified as one of the healthiest diets. Um, we have been raised in a country that has emphasized that if you're a man, you need red meat. And so if you are a male, you are undoubtedly saying to yourself, I cannot go a day without eating red meat, most likely. Most likely. And I have found that most of the time men will say, I can't go one day without eating red meat. But we have been conditioned to do that. But we can certainly, we don't have to. It dates back to commercials with Burger King, and it just dates back to advertisements. But we do know that even though you need more protein, you don't need to have more red meat. There's going to be a quick video about cultured meat. It is an option. It has become much more flavorful, close. I also like those bean bean meats. Boy, I'll tell you, there's some really great options that you can buy now that uh, substituting where you would not even know that it was not chicken, and it's very, very good. The vegetarian diet, there are many types of diets that are vegetarian. If we looked at individual type diets, a vegetarian diet can be pesco vegetarian, it could be vegan, but vegetarian diets vary. You have to be very conscientious of making sure that you get all of your nutrients. It doesn't mean that you can eat only cheese and and you still have to have a wide variety of food, but it is if you eat good vegetables and you have a good amount of vegetables, beans, legumes, you can have a great sound diet. It is very healthful. Boy, and I tell you, you can do so much. There has been a great improvement in vegan baking, vegan foods. You can go to a restaurant and eat vegan now, where even 10 years ago you had no choices. So there are many more options to live a vegetarian lifestyle and still have wonderful choices and good food. Whenever you buy an item at the grocery store, you have an option to look at the nutrition facts label. It gives you a lot of information, and when I look at that nutrition facts label, I'm always looking at how many servings and evaluating if it's something that I want to choose. And it's more of an information to me. I identify, is this something that I would like to use my, is it worth it for me, or is it kind of a splurge, or no? Does it have the right base nutrients in it? Now, on that previous slide, it said, make sure you look for at least this and this. I am going to suggest to you, when you look at figure 5.4, you can see the calories, the serving size, you can see whether or not a food has a significant contribution of vitamin D, if it has a reasonable amount of calcium and iron. You can identify if it's high sodium. It's very, very helpful because we're trying to look for foods with calcium, with low sodium, trying to limit those things, low saturated fat. And but I wanted I want to discourage you when you use those pieces of information that consider, when you're making dietary changes, not to deny yourself, but to consider, what can I put on my plate to balance it out? Maybe moderate, maybe moderate something and put more of some more vegetable, or eat some more fruit, or maybe I can add more spaghetti sauce, put more vegetables in my spaghetti sauce, or change the noodles to a different noodle for my spaghettis. Because whenever we say, I'm never going to eat fill in the blank again, it is a denial that is very negative. Denial and guilt will never last. And I want to discourage you from denying, but adding something to your food intake that is going to improve your diet, and maybe moderating what you see as something that you want to change. So maybe you want to drink less soda, so drink more water. Maybe you want to eat less red meat, so add a different form of protein. Maybe you can change the kind of cookie that you eat fewer per week, but once you say you're never going to eat a cookie again, it becomes difficult, because then you go to a party or a friend's house and then you're like, well, all they have is cookies. It becomes very difficult to live life, and you want to be able to live your life. Restaurants now have information that helps tremendously, because you can identify if it has nutrients or ingredients that you may be allergic to. When you look at items at the store, be aware the difference between use by and best if used by. Use by means that it's a perishable food, and If it is past the use by date, technically it should be tossed. If it's best if used by, you can still consume it. It just means that it doesn't have as good of a flavor. Doesn't mean you have to throw it away. So best if used by just means that it's the best. It's best if you eat it by that date, but you can still eat it after that. And that's usually those types of foods that are in cans, um, or some have some sort of preservative. So keep that in mind. We can always consider drinking less soft drinks. Always consider how much caffeine we're drinking. I'm also going to remind you that diet sodas, here it says artificial sweeteners, health health effects, adverse health effects. All of that work is looking at correlation. Just because though that old data said that there was a correlation between drinking a diet soda and a negative outcome doesn't mean there was a cause and effect, because in those old research studies they didn't control for many other factors, whether or not people were exercising, what else they ate, whether or not their body composition or their body weight. So a correlation does not mean cause and effect. So we have to be really careful. What we know about diet sodas, they can be helpful. So let's just stay off that fence, or maybe stay on the fence. If they work for you, that's fine, but just don't drink 10 in one day. So we know coffee has a fair amount, but coffee can keep you up at night or alter your sleep. So be aware of the caffeine in beverages and when you drink it. Be aware of when you look at something that says it's healthy. When you purchase it at a store, if you get the fancy pants drink at Starbucks, it's going to have probably plenty of calories. It's going to have a lot of ingredients in there. Just be aware of it. Maybe you want to get a smaller size. Maybe you want to just have it as a treat. Just make sure that it fits into your balanced diet. And nobody says you can't have it, right? So just make sure it fits in. And you can sometimes make it enjoy something at home that is, has less. Uh, Make sure that if you're not drinking milk or cheese, that you get foods that are fortified with calcium, because we do have a problem with calcium and vitamin D. Less packaged foods, less convenience foods, making your own foods at home. We tend to salt less. So overconsumption of salt, easy way to take care of that is buy less boxes, shop on the outside of the store, and make it at home. We know that food allergies and food intolerances are a thing. That's why we do need to read our food labels well, look at be careful when we're at a restaurant, and also be mindful of how we cook. Celiac disease and gluten are a thing. It is wheat, barley, rye, and triticale. Uh, Never have seen that on anything, but it is actually an autoimmune component, and it is pretty problematic. There is no benefit if you are not sensitive. A gluten-free diet has no benefit unless you have celiac or you're gluten sensitive, and that would be if you would want to get tested. So gluten-free foods are not better than regular foods by any means. So I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. Notice that eating fast foods, you can make better choices. If you do go out, you can make choices that are going to be because you have information of whether or not you have um, higher sodium or fat. So you get information on the labels now, where not many years ago you didn't. And almost done here, there are areas that are called they're some food deserts used to be the term, but regions with limited access to healthful and affordable foods. These are areas that are can be found in urban or rural geographical areas, and it's the food insecurity is going to be associated with uh, an individual or a family having poor access to foods that are healthful. And often the food is going to be, individuals are going to be of a lower socioeconomic status, racial and ethnic minority groups, and they tend to have a greater number of fast food restaurants. They tend to be cheaper, although, dollar menus, although I'll tell you, it's getting more expensive to eat at those fast food restaurants, is what I've seen. Uh, but they have tremendous amount of those fast food restaurants, convenience foods, are often high in those nutrients that are going to be associated with dietary diseases like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, stroke, low cancer survival, and certain cancers. And so this population that live in this area have the highest burden of these chronic diseases in America, and thus they get blamed, and it's because of where they live and their access to healthcare, access to food, access to affordable, good food. So that is a real problem in terms of where the geographical area and where stores are located. Now, this is can be anywhere. Could be just because there's not enough people in a geographical area for a store to come in and to be able to function. Food insecurity is a thing on college campuses. And I think this is 45% of US college students have faced food insecurity. And I want you to know that there are food initiatives. There's essential needs. It has a number of, one is the food pantry. You can go there, I think once every 2 weeks. Um, it changes during the semester, but I put the email address or the web address. It's just essential dash needs, and you'll see all the initiatives that are available to you. Is organic food better for you? Well, there's really been not been shown there are better health benefits, better environmental benefits. Now it certainly is better for the environment because there are fewer pesticides. However, you still got to wash your organic produce thoroughly. Don't assume, because they will use pesticides as well. Now, am I saying that everything's fixed? We don't. We definitely need to do better with how we're farming. Foodborne illnesses, we certainly have to be careful at how we handle our food. And if you do get sick after eating at a restaurant, make sure you call it in, because you call the restaurant, and you can also call the health department, so they're aware. Norovirus is not fun. Had it this summer. Safety for food. There's figure 5.9. Take a look at that. And last but not least, I wanted to just mention about genetically modified foods. That is when foods are modified with biotechnology. It is much faster than selective breeding, is when you look back at how uh, goodness sakes, when when genes were first studied, and I'm not going to remember what that is, and I'm kind of mad at myself that I can't remember the P's. Anyway, why genetically modified foods or biotechnology, what it does for us is it makes food cheaper to grow, cheaper to purchase, better to look at, less uh, improvement in insects, insect resistance, we can feed more people with less space. There's more diversity. We are actually doing, there's work to make uh, crops resistant for climate change right now. So being able to identify how to grow coffee in a place with in an area besides where coffee is typically grown because it's getting difficult to grow there because of the climate. So it is really important to be able to study and be able to make those changes. And the safety, we have much higher safety standards in the United States than anywhere. However, there are potential negative sides that have been identified as well. And so there's the other side as well, but the risk and benefit ratio, we always have to look at, there's always two sides of it. I think the safety side of it is really important, and being able to improve food security is very, very critical. So there is your second half to nutrition, and hopefully you'll be able to take your quiz.